All right, on to the game of the hour, it would seem. We have a lot of embargo restrictions.
Yeah.
Man, I am tripping up today. I played Zelda until like 2 a.m. last night. That was that was the most time I've had with a Switch, too. We're going to get into the Switch specifically at the end of the show today. But we want to devote a lot of time to Zelda, kind of based around the idea of whether it feels like a Zelda game. Because from what we've been talking about, and I know like what, you know, like we're right next to Giant Bomb. We've been talking to them about it too. Mm-hmm. And Callie, you're a Zelda fan.
Yes.
To say the least. Pete, you are too. So am I. And a lot of the things that we're all saying around the office is that we're excited for this game for reasons other than we usually are for a Zelda game.
Sure. Yeah.
Based on what we've seen and what we've played.
Frankly, it's the unexpected.
Yeah.
It's the discovery of things you never saw coming and never realized were possible in the game. And all that exists around, you know, what appears to be a traditional Zelda game. So, in my mind, it kind of feels like the best of both worlds.
Yeah. And to clarify for people watching, if you have questions in YouTube chat and Twitch chat, GameSpot, send them our way. I have a few written down, but I have a few things on Twitter. Pete, your review will be up. Can you talk about when it'll be up?
Yeah, 3 a.m. Pacific time tomorrow morning.
Okay.
So it's coming in hot.
Yeah. Early review based around, I'm assuming, like Japan times. Something like that. Who knows? Yeah, so 3 a.m. Pacific tomorrow. You can see the full review. Pete's pretty much done with it for the most part. You got to edit it and whatnot.
Oh, with the review?
Yeah.
It's
not the, yeah.
Right. Been cramming on the review. There is a lot to unpack in this game, and we can technically right now only speak about the first 5 hours, but even then, there's more to talk about with this game than most games.
Yeah, I mean, that was my experience even playing demos at E3 and stuff, and playing a demo more recently is everybody did a different thing. And everyone I talked to, it was like, oh, I went over here and I saw this, and there was this cute thing that happened when I cooked, and like Link hums when he cooks, and it's like the one thing that I took away from the demo I thought was I just love the little details.
Right.
And then everyone I talked to was like, oh, well, I went to a mountain and you can freeze, like you get really cold, and I'm like, I didn't even know there was a mountain I could go to in this demo. Like it. Even in like a 15-minute demo, you have all of that to unpack.
After almost a week playing this game, almost nonstop, Mike, in playing it last night for just a couple hours, discovered something.
First 20 minutes
discovered something I had never seen before.
Can we talk about that or no?
Yeah.
Okay. That's the thing about this game. I mean, aside from the survival elements, aside from just how enticing it is to explore. I know when the first Zelda ever came out, that was like the first time people were, holy shit, I want to explore every inch of this. Mm-hmm. And then Ocarina came out and showed you could do it in 3D. You know, from the first 5 hours that we're talking about, to me, it felt like I looked out over this world. This shot right here that we're looking at is just like, that's a promise on this game's part. It's like, you're going to fucking like get wrapped up in all of this. And it does feel a little bit like a Zelda game in some of the mechanics and, you know, obviously the aesthetic and the charm and the music and a lot of what the story that's unraveling that I am just getting into. Pete, you have seen much, much more than I have. But yeah, we're finding things continually. We're having these emergent situations. We're having these water cooler conversations that we haven't really had since like Metal Gear Solid 5, but even not to that. This is more than that.
This something else.
This surpasses that. And that game was filled with creative opportunities, right? But those were always at your hand. It was sort of like how you had control over the elements at play and what you decided to come up with. This is almost just about seeing things happen because of what an enemy is doing or something that you just never considered before because the game just doesn't tell you much at all. It's basically like, all right, you have to go save the princess. What it tells you.
Calamity Ganon is taking over the castle.
Ganon, go to these things to get a couple powers.
You've been asleep for 100 years.
You've been asleep for 100 years. Go to these shrines, get these powers, and then basically like, all right, man, you gotta go. Just go. And you know, like one of the first combat situations I got into, it was, you know, the thing we saw at E3, right, where it's like a skull-looking like cave. There's some goblins inside of it. Yeah. And I go up there with, you know, I found something better than a tree branch, but it was still just like a basic club. And I roll up there and I'm trying to like sneak and like I kill the guy on the platform and he's got a bow and arrow. And so I try to use that. But by the time I've got that, there's other goblins that are killing me. It took the first combat encounter, like the first real one, took me like 3 or 4 tries to solve.
Yeah.
And it was because I had to find a bow and arrow and shoot a rope to drop an explosive thing to blow up the barrels of the guys inside the cave. And it's just all these little like intricate things that you have to like take care of and consider. Because if you don't, you're gonna get your ass handed to you.
Yeah.
It's very easy to die in this game, both in combat and if you push yourself too far.
Yeah, to go back to what we were talking about, I was playing for about 20 minutes and I got a shield, and I had a bow. You kind of just stumble across these things. To clarify, it's not just you don't get the fairy bow. It's not the Kokiri bow. You get a bow, and you're gonna get like 10 more in the next 20 minutes.
Every single weapon you get from killing an enemy or finding it in the field. You're not going to shops and purchasing weapons. That's not a thing.
Yeah,
like that's crazy.
Yeah. You're getting these abilities with that Sheikah slate, that thing that's hanging on his neck, around his belt. It's kind of like the Focus from Horizon Zero Dawn. Now that I think of it, the way it's framed narratively, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, I had a bow. I didn't have any arrows. I went up to this bokoblin camp. I was holding my shield up. A guy was pointing a bow and arrow at me. I was like, oh shit, he's about to hit me, and he shot me, and the arrow stuck in my shield. I was like, oh, that's cool. I didn't have any arrows left, so I just retreated because there's 4 other guys. I didn't want to fight them because this game's pretty tough and pretty unforgiving. So I went to, not holster, but put my shield back on my back, like unequip it to run away. And I was like, oh, I wish it would have shown the arrow still in the shield, and it disappeared. I was like, damn, that sucks. But then I was like, oh, holy shit, it just added that arrow that was stuck in my shield to my inventory.
Yo, that's so cool.
Yeah, so I was talking to Pete and Rob, and apparently they didn't even know that, and I've been playing 20 minutes, and we're still seeing things that the other, how many hours have you put into it now? Can you talk about that?
I don't know if I can. I can't remember. But
you put a lot.
I've been playing it for almost a week, almost nonstop.
And you didn't see that, or you didn't notice it. But that's the thing. There's so much shit going on in this world. You're always thinking it's difficult, but I think that works, right? Because in old games, I was just talking to these NPCs in Zelda for the sake of it, right? I was just saying, I want to know more about this world. But here, they tell you useful stuff.
Yeah.
This guy has an item that you eventually want to trade to him for, or this person. I had this really cool moment yesterday before I was leaving the office where Matt and Jimmy, who were both playing it too, Jimmy was having a conversation with this person, and I'm not going to get into specifics because I don't want to spoil it. I don't even know if I can't talk about this specifically, but Jimmy had this conversation with this person. They had this proposal for him, and he said, yeah, it turned out he shouldn't have. But then Matt knew not to say that to this person because he had spoken to this random NPC in Kakariko Village, which is nuts.
What?
I don't know if it affected the outcome, but they both had these completely different experiences within the open
Did it have
world.
to do with a merchant?
No.
Oh.
It's like this clan I was talking to you before.
Right. Yeah.
And they were talking about, he's like, oh, holy shit, that person told you this? He's like, yeah, it was a water cooler conversation where they were discovering that they both had completely different experiences.
It's like when you were in school and you would have a playground conversation about I don't know how to beat this boss. How do I do it? talking to your friends, when Ocarina came out and it'd be like, oh, you can go here and how do I do this? And it's a total. And now we're seeing snowboarding, which is crazy. But the thing I love about it is I haven't had that in a long time. A lot of times I can just kind of figure out a game. I don't necessarily need to ask the people I know for oh, how do I do this? What's the best way to do this? And this one is I could talk about this for, I feel months. I feel like I'm gonna be playing this for months and never see everything.
People will be flooding Reddit and NeoGAF for years to come, with stuff from this game. This is Rob Handler's footage of snowboarding down a mountain on a shield, kind of Legolasing. And then you see this, kills these 3, and he could have dropped a bomb here from the paraglider.
Right.
Yeah.
But he chose to do something way cooler.
Yeah.
He's about to do it here, actually.
I can't wait to talk about this game without any restrictions.
Yeah, because you've seen a ton. I was watching you play very, very late game stuff, and it was crazy watching. I hope yeah, there you go. So you could drop the remote bombs, and see, you're like a fucking bomber plane. Oh my god! But then the thing to consider when you're paragliding above a lake or something. Your stamina is running out when you're holding it. It takes energy to hold on to that when the wind is pushing you every which way. If you fall in a lake, it takes stamina to swim. You could easily drown, so you can't just aim for the middle of a lake to negate falling damage.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, maybe you can, because I found this item that is just like bokoblin guts, and I didn't think anything of it other than, oh yeah, I'll sell this or maybe I'll cook it. But if you read the description, it says something along the lines of maybe you could use this to make something float. And so I was talking to Spencer in the office about it, and he was like, oh, because I tied it to a weapon and the weapon floated, and I was like, okay, well, I don't get the point of that. And then he was like, oh, maybe the weapon, if you have that attached to it and you're holding it, will help you float and you won't sink. And I was just like, Oh my
What?
God.
Yeah,
That might be possible.
I was overhearing a converation about that, and like it blew my mind. It's like I'm never gonna finish this game. I feel like I will always be playing it.
I think, something that's immediately apparent is that you just have. You don't feel like you understand. Like, there's so many games go out of their way to be like, are you sure you got everything?
Yes.
Do you understand it all?
Specifically, like Zelda games, some do
Sure.
that.
Oh,
Skyward
yeah.
Sword,
Skyward
I
Sword.
hated how it did that.
Coming off of Skyward Sword, this is such a don't want to say breath of fresh air, but yes, it's crazy. Helmed by the same director too, which kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, and obviously, like the fact that there's so much detail in this game and so many interlocking systems is probably a testament to the fact that it's the biggest team Nintendo's ever had on a project, right?
Yes, and it also has incorporated Monolith Soft, who made Xenoblade Chronicles, and the world is super evident of their involvement. It's great verticality, and even something as simple as like a large plane will look interesting, even though it's just a huge field of grass. They managed to change the elevation just the right ways, and there's been a lot of time and energy put into even what seems like the most basic elements of this game, and I think that's only possible when you do something like a company Nintendo making the biggest game they've ever made.
And that's the thing about it. It's constantly reminding you, not in a bad way, that yeah, it's a Zelda game, but I'm not thinking through it like I usually do a Zelda game. Usually a Zelda game, I'm kind of, the open world is just there to get me to the next dungeon or to get the next the Megaton Hammer or the fairy bow or the hook shot. In this, I'm constantly thinking, do I have enough like pepper soup or whatever it is to keep me warm when I'm going into the mountains, or else I'm going to freeze to death. And I have 4 hearts. I'm going to be fucked if I don't.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Is we started this conversation talking about like, is it more like, are we excited because it's a Zelda game or because it's doing all these interesting things? And it's very different from how I would normally approach Zelda. Like I thought I had the language of Zelda down, and then playing this, it's like, oh, I have to completely learn a new vocabulary to be able to play this game.
Yeah, the first 5 hours, there are these shrines you go into, and there are these tutorial. I mean, they are kind of tutorials for how you use the Sheikah Slate for the powers,
But it's
right?
like, it's just a splash screen.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just a little thing that says press this button to activate this power.
And you figure it out
That's
in the dungeon.
Yeah, you figure. Yeah, but even it's like a tutorial, but it's not, because those dungeons are really shrines. Like they grow in complexity over time. So yeah, they start basic, but it's certainly not like anywhere near what Skyward Sword is doing.
I want to keep talking about this game forever. We could talk much more about it next week.
Yeah.
When your review is up. Your review will be up tomorrow at 3 a.m.
And Rob
Pacific.
Handlery and I will be doing a live stream tomorrow at 8 a.m.
8 to 11, 3 hours, right?
Yeah,
Cool.
We're just gonna
Pacific time.
talk about all the things I can't talk about today, but
Yes.
I wish I could.
I have a shit ton of questions I want to get to because I would be remiss if I did not.
Don't be remiss, Mike.
You mentioned degradable weapons. Andrew Jelly on Twitter says, do the degradable weapons in Breath of the Wild dampen the experience? They're not as fond of those types of mechanics in games. How do you feel about that?
It certainly feels strange at first because Zelda games, you sort of always measure your progress by what gear and equipment you have, right? So to lose a weapon that seems cool, it's kind of like, oh, yeah, that's a bit of a bummer. But you have an endless supply of weapons, and because they evolve over time, like in terms of where you are in the world, what's available in that particular environment, you get to use like a lot of different stuff. It's not just like 4 swords. I know it's the title of a Zelda game, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not just having a handful of swords to deal with. You are dealing with, I mean, I have no idea how many variations of weapons. So yes, the things break, but it's super fascinating to me just that it doesn't actually impede on the experience. Because Link is struggling to do everything, right? And you could argue that like, well, maybe weapons don't need to break for him to still struggle. But like, it's just that extra little notch of just dialing it up and making you have to consider a little bit more. But you're never out of weapons, right? You have the bomb thing that you can use. If you find an enemy that has something when you don't have any weapons, throw a bomb on him.
Yeah, they're not a limited quantity. Well,
Right.
they're limited in that it's
There's a
based on
cooldown
like
time.
mana. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's no real mana to speak of though.
Right,
But
it's
cooldown
it's a
time.
cooldown.
Yeah.
Sure. And yeah, I found that the degradable weapons was constantly changing my approach each time. Like, I have this bokoblin club I can use.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, I'm set. But then that breaks. The next camp I come up to, I have a twig. Maybe I could just smack them with it, or I could go up to this fire, light it, and throw it at them to blow up these barrels next to them, which I might not have done if I was just going to go in with that bokoblin club again.
Yeah.
I mean, you're forced to just sort of try things differently all the time, and that's a great thing.
Yeah. I think the degradable weapons work. I would not have thought I would have said that in a Zelda game, but
I normally don't like that mechanic because it's always like, it seems tedious, but it works very well because you're constantly managing your your resources, and that's a big part of what you're doing. And so it goes very well with what's already there versus some games I'm like, okay, I really my sword broke, really? Okay, I guess I'm going to go do this thing that's, if the rest of the game is linear or something, it seems very unnatural, and this is very different.
Right. CD14 on Twitter was asking, of all the 3D Zeldas, which one is Breath of the Wild from the first 5 hours that we've played most reminiscent of?
I didn't play a lot of Twilight Princess because I couldn't get past that wolf tutorial in terms of I just didn't want to play it.
Yeah.
I got a really strong vibe, similar to the way I felt when I played Ocarina of Time. Maybe not because of the mechanical similarities or the systems at play, but it just, that sense of just this is new. This is new and exciting, and it feels like Zelda, but it's doing things I've never really done in a Zelda game before. And for Ocarina of Time, that was just being in 3D, to a point.
Yeah.
But here it's so much more. But it's that I get that same sense of just amazement.
It definitely recaptures that feeling. I remember playing Ocarina of Time, and you see Death Mountain in the distance, and realizing you can go there was such a big deal. And obviously now it's replaying it doesn't have that same feel because you can go there. But that scene we saw earlier where you're looking out and there's a mountain in the distance, it's that feeling of Ocarina of Time times 1,000.
Yeah.
And I love that it's giving me that sense again of, I don't even know where I'm going to go yet, but I'm going to go over there. I'm going to figure it out.
Maybe it's just me, but I feel like the Zelda series has kind of been just spinning its tires for a while. You know what I mean?
They introduced these new mechanics. I think Link Between Worlds was fantastic game.
Well, sure.
That was an awesome game.
Right. But not something that is revolutionary.
Sure.
Right? The way that this seems to be. That game leaned quite heavily into the fact that hey, it's the old system, but we've tweaked it a little bit.
Right.
You know what I mean? This is just kind of nothing old is here. This is all new. This is very different.
Based on the first 5 hours, it's almost like Nintendo didn't want to say what makes a Zelda game and how can we iterate on that. It seems like they asked themselves, how do we change the definition of a Zelda game?
Yeah.
And that's super exciting. And I wish we could talk way more about that. But more specifically, is it aiming in Breath of the Wild on either platform? Someone, JC in the Twitch chat was asking, this is coming to Wii U. They asked. Yes, it is. Do we know when? The specific date? Can we talk? It's
same day.
Launch day.
Friday.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, but we have not tried that version.
Yeah, we have not tried it, but yes, JG in the Twitch chat is coming to Wii U. But someone asks, on either platform, is aiming on Breath of the Wild exclusively reliant on the gyroscopic functionality? Can you disable it?
You can disable it. Yeah, you can choose to use it or not. I actually like to use it on Switch, especially when I'm playing in handheld mode.
Yeah.
And with the Pro Controller, it helps too. There are times when precision is necessary, where you're manipulating something using a magical power, where it's you gotta get a weird angle, and it's all right, I'm now twisting my Switch like this. I should just use the analog stick.
Yeah, when I was using the Joy-Con, the frame controller with the Joy-Cons on it, I was aiming with this analog stick, but then when I switched to the when I changed to the handheld tablet, I was using the gyroscope, and I love that. It feels really good. It feels like it does on the 3DS. I have a bunch of questions about this. So what are the consequences of death in Zelda? I think a lot of people are wondering, is there a Dark Souls-esque thing, or is it just a game over and restart?
It's just a game over and you restart from one of the last of many autosaves. The game does a good job of realizing when you're entering an area that might be threatening and saving you, the game for you.
And you can also just do an old school Zelda pause and save.
Yes, and you're allowed one slot for manual saves.
Okay, so you can't. It's not like Skyrim where you can have a shit ton saved up.
No.
Yeah.
And you can just be I messed up. I'm gonna start from this save.
Right.
That's my classic move.
I like that though. If I had a ton, I would maybe go back 10 saves and then restart these outposts.
Then you're hacking the system.
Right.
Then you're not really
You're not
You're not
surviving.
playing the adventure the way it's meant to be played.
Yeah, with one save, you have to rely on just the items you have, or at least that you did in your last save, and I like that.
Yeah, I like that too.
But then just a lot of questions in general. That last question, the consequence of death, was George M on Twitter.
All right.
But yeah, in general, it just feels like a simulation game almost, and how these mechanics can, not like a SimCity or anything, but how these mechanics can interlock and how these systems are kind of layered on top of each other.
Yeah, there's a pretty good physics model at play.
I've only played 5 hours, I played like 4 hours, and we can only talk about the first 5 hours. But so far, I feel like I'm thinking constantly more than I do in open world games. I love Horizon. I've been playing a lot of that. But even then, I'm still kind of going through the motions to get from point A to point B if I'm not hunting an animal. Even when I come across certain machines that I fought before, I'm going through the motions. I have this muscle memory, and I turn my brain off and just play. Zelda, I'm constantly thinking so far.
Yeah.
And that's weird for a Zelda game. I mean, you go into dungeons and you do puzzles and you're thinking constantly, right? And like, the Water Temple or the Fire Temple or Snow Peak Ruins. But now I'm thinking like, I'm halfway up this cliff. My stamina is half drained. It is cold, so I need to somehow get to a place where I can eat this soup I cooked earlier that will warm me up and resist the cold. But I might fall off this cliff before I get up there. So now I'm balancing stamina and my cold, my like hypothermia I can get, which is going to deplete my health. I'm fucked if I can't get up to the top of this cliff in the next 10 seconds.
You're like, it's constantly like you're weighing like opportunity cost of things and weighing like, okay, here's what I have, here's what I can cook, here's what I can do if I don't fall off this cliff, which I might.
Yeah, no, I mean it's some people are saying it looks like it's more of an open world survival game with a Zelda finish. Yeah. But to circle back for the end of the segment to the question I was asking before, does it feel like a Zelda game?
It does to me.
Callie, what about you?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, there are story points early in the game that we won't spoil that I think sets up a very Zelda-like story.
Yes. Yeah. And there's little touches as well that are very familiar. Yeah. That I think only people feel at home despite all that's new and strange around them.
There's puzzle solving. Yeah. There are dungeons, maybe not in the traditional sense of you're going to go to this one, get this medallion, then you're going to have to go to Death Mountain and get this.
As we've been told countless times, you don't even need to go through the dungeons.
Right.
Yeah. You can once you get off the first area, you can try to go right to Ganon.
I mean, even when it's not...
That's crazy.
Right?
I want to see that.
Even when it's not similar to what we know about Zelda in terms of gameplay or structure, it still, to me, has like the spirit and feel of Zelda. I think Nintendo generally does this really well, is giving like a certain kind of charm and characterization with very minimal without using words. Nintendo's really good at that. And so in that sense, I feel, even in the beginning, a lot more of Zelda in that sense rather than in structure.
I'm just reading this. I don't know if we have a news story up, but apparently the prototype for Breath of the Wild back in the day started as an 8-bit game. At a GDC talk just now, Breath of the Wild director, I might be butchering this, Hidemaru Fujibayashi, revealed a prototype of the game that looks remarkably like the original 8-bit rendition of Legend of Zelda, but with concepts introduced in Breath of the Wild. It was used as a proof of concept.
Yeah, okay. No, I can see that. That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. And that was The Verge just published that story. I just saw it on my Twitter feed, that's cool. Because I think this game is actually kind of hewing closely to what made the original Legend of Zelda great at that time in 1987.
Well,
it's certainly just like lets you loose, right? With like, here you are. Like, what do I do?
You can go here, but you're going to get fucked up if you don't have this sword. Yeah. Which is cool.
You meet a hermit. He gives you a thing.
Yes.
Good luck.
Talk to an old man.
Yeah.
Gives you a hint.
We would love to keep talking about this game. We could talk about it much more after Pete's review goes up tomorrow morning, 3 a.m. Pacific time.
Yes, and check for the video review on site and on YouTube and all that.
And then at 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Pacific, Pete and Rob Handler will be playing straight through 3 hours of it, just until they drop.
And everything is fair game. All restrictions are off, so if you want to talk about whatever.
Yeah, we're kind of holding ourselves back now, especially Pete, because he's played so much of it, but tomorrow he will not have to. So the review will be up. I'm sorry if I didn't get to more questions. I wish we had more time. Keep sending them to Pete. Bother him. Sorry, Pete. But yeah, thank you for everybody who sent them in via Twitter and via Twitch and the YouTube chats. I appreciate it. And let us know what you think if you're watching this on GameSpot after the fact or YouTube. We appreciate the comments.